Long before people thought of plants as decoration, the plants kept closest to where people lived were chosen with care. They were not selected to fill empty corners or add color to a room. They were selected because they changed how a space felt, how the air moved, and how people experienced daily life. In older homes, plants were not background objects. They were part of the household itself. Living spaces used to be more contained. Air moved differently. Windows were opened with intention. Heat came from fire, light from flame or sun, and scent from whatever lived inside the walls. In that environment, fragrance mattered deeply. It was one of the few ways a home could feel clean, calm, and welcoming without effort. Certain plants earned their place indoors because people noticed that life felt easier when they were nearby. Lavender was one of the most enduring examples of this relationship. It was kept near sleeping spaces not because people understood aromatherapy, but because they understood rest. Homes that smelled gently of lavender felt quieter at night. Sleep came faster. Children settled more easily. Even when lavender was dried and no longer growing, its presence remained. The scent became associated with safety, stillness, and the end of the day. Over time, lavender stopped being just a plant and became a signal that the home was a place of rest. Rosemary served a different role. It was sharp where lavender was soft. Rosemary was often placed near doors, kitchens, and work areas because it refreshed the air as people moved past it. Its scent released when brushed against, meaning it interacted directly with daily activity. Homes with rosemary felt alert and open rather than heavy. People noticed that spaces with rosemary smelled clean even when they were That reliability made it valuable. Mint was kept where life was most active, near washing areas, cooking spaces, and entryways. Its scent cut through heat, moisture, and food smells naturally. Mint did not require careful tending. It grew readily, responded quickly, and offered fragrance generously. Because of this, it became associated with abundance and care rather than control. A home with mint felt lively and refreshed, even during long days. Basil was often kept close to where meals were prepared, but its role went beyond cooking. Its scent carried warmth and familiarity. When basil grew indoors, it reminded people that food was alive before it was eaten. The smell of basil in a living space connected nourishment to presence. Meals felt rooted in place rather than routine. In many homes, basil was not moved far from the heart of the household. Jasmine introduced a different rhythm entirely. It was placed where evening air could reach it, near windows, doorways, or sleeping spaces. Jasmine released its fragrance slowly, often strongest at night. That timing mattered. Homes with jasmine felt softer after sunset. Conversations lingered. Rest felt deeper. The plant was never overwhelming. It waited, and when it released its scent, it did so gently. That patience became part of the home's atmosphere. Geraniums were valued for their resilience. They thrived on windowsills where light shifted and temperatures changed. Their leaves released scent when touched, meaning they responded to movement and care. Geraniums made living spaces feel lived in rather than delicate. They survived neglect and rewarded attention. That reliability mirrored the homes they lived in. Time offered grounding. Its scent was earthy and steady. It was often kept near workspaces or kitchens where routine dominated the day. Time did not announce itself. It remained present, subtle, and consistent. Homes with time felt stable, nothing rushed, nothing forced. The plant became part of the background rhythm of daily life. What made these plants important was not their individuality, but how they worked together. Each one influenced the space differently. Calm, alertness, freshness, warmth, softness, steadiness. Living spaces were not meant to feel neutral. They were meant to feel balanced. These plants created that balance naturally. People did not analyze this. They lived it. They noticed which plants stayed, which were moved closer, and which were replaced when lost. Over generations, certain plants simply became part of what a home was supposed to contain. This is why these plants were always kept near living spaces, not because of tradition alone, but because homes felt incomplete without them. The presence of these plants inside living spaces did more than shape how a home smelled. Over time, they shaped how a home was remembered. Scent has always been one of the strongest carriers of memory, and long before anyone understood the science behind it, families understood the effect. A home that smelled the same year after year felt stable, familiar, safe. Children grew up recognizing the scent of their home before they could name the plants themselves. Lavender, rosemary, mint, and basil became part of family identity. Their scents marked ordinary moments that later became meaningful. Early mornings when windows were opened, evenings when light softened and the house grew quiet, meals prepared slowly, conversations shared without urgency. These plants absorbed those moments and reflected them back through scent. Long after furniture changed or rooms were rearranged, the smell remained the same. Plants also created emotional continuity during change. When families moved, cuttings were often taken. A small pot, carried from one home to another, preserved familiarity in unfamiliar surroundings. A lavender plant placed near a new bed, a rosemary pot set by a new doorway. The home adjusted faster when something familiar was present. These plants helped spaces feel lived in more quickly, even before habits formed. In shared homes where multiple generations lived together, fragrant plants softened tension. Crowded spaces offered little privacy, but scent created emotional separation. A room with jasmine or lavender felt different from a workspace scented with rosemary or thyme. People gravitated toward spaces that matched their needs without ever articulating why. Calm found calm. Activity found freshness. These plants quietly organized the emotional flow of the household. Care for these plants was rarely discussed but always practiced. Watering, pruning, moving them closer to light, or protecting them from cold became part of daily routine. These acts were small, but they carried meaning. They signaled care not only for the plant, but for the space it lived in. A tended plant meant a tended home. Neglect was visible, and so was attention. Fragrant plants also played a role in relationships. Their presence encouraged gentler behavior. People handled them carefully. They noticed when they thrived or struggled. That awareness extended outward. A space that held living things invited patience. Conversations slowed. Touch softened. Even conflict felt quieter in rooms that smelled alive rather than artificial. Over time, these plants became emotional anchors. When people were tired, stressed, or uncertain, familiar scents grounded them. A single brush against rosemary, a breath of mint, or the steady presence of thyme reminded them where they were. In a world with few distractions and many uncertainties, this grounding mattered deeply. The connection between scent and love was never stated directly. It did not need to be. Love lived in repetition. In the plant watered every morning. In the pot moved closer to warmth during winter. In the dried herbs replaced when their scent faded. These acts formed a quiet language of care that did not rely on words. This is why fragrant plants remained close to living spaces for generations. They supported emotional life without demanding attention. They offered comfort without performance. And in doing so, they helped families feel connected to each other and to the place they called home. Across different cultures and regions, the specific plants kept near living spaces often changed, but the purpose behind them remained remarkably similar. In warmer climates, jasmine, basil, and citrus blossoms were favored for their evening fragrance and ability to soften heat. In cooler regions, lavender, rosemary, and geraniums were chosen for their resilience and steady scent indoors. Despite differences in climate and lifestyle, people across the world arrived at the same conclusion. Certain plants belonged close to where life happened. These choices were shaped by practicality rather than symbolism. Plants that survived indoors, responded well to touch, and released fragrance naturally were kept. Those that did not were moved outside. Over generations, this created a shared plant vocabulary that appeared in homes separated by geography but united by human needs. Calm, freshness, warmth, and familiarity were universal, even when the plants providing them were not. This quiet consistency reveals something important. The use of fragrant plants near living spaces was not a trend or tradition tied to one culture. It was a response to living conditions. When people paid attention to how their homes felt, they chose plants that improved that feeling, and those plants stayed. The change came quietly. As artificial scents became easier to produce and use, fragrance no longer required care or time. A home could smell pleasant instantly, without plants, seasons, or attention. Over time, this convenience reshaped expectations. Scent became something applied rather than grown. Living plants were no longer needed for atmosphere, and their role inside the home slowly diminished. What was lost was not fragrance itself, but the relationship behind it. Artificial scents filled space without asking anything in return. They did not change with light, weather, or care. Homes began to smell the same regardless of who lived there. The quiet individuality once created by living plants faded, replaced by uniformity and control. What people are rediscovering now is not a forgotten trend, but a familiar feeling. When fragrant plants return to living spaces, homes begin to feel softer, calmer, and more personal again. Not because the plants are doing something new, but because they are doing what they have always done. They bring life closer. These plants do not demand attention. They respond to it. In that response, something subtle shifts. Care becomes routine. Presence becomes habit. And the home regains a sense of quiet warmth that cannot be manufactured. This is why certain plants were always kept near living spaces. They shaped atmosphere not through control, but through coexistence. They turned houses into homes long